If you've been looking for a new or certified Toyota, come be part of the team. With inventory arriving daily, we'll help you find a vehicle that works for your lifestyle and budget. We'll continue to ensure that your next buying experience is as safe and efficient as possible. Our service center is open with easy online scheduling and a quick, clean process to get you back on the road safely. Head to teamtoyota.net and be safe, be strong, be a team. Hey, everybody, this is the Phillies Talk podcast. He's Jim Salisbury, and I'm Corey Seidman, and we are sitting here the morning after a pretty ugly Phillies series opener and a crucial four-game stretch against the Braves. The Phillies dealt with bad starting pitching, bad defense early that set the tone, and Atlanta just looked like the better team in the first of a four-game series that now has these two clubs tied in the NL East. Jim, it was not a good outing from Matt Moore, who had pitched pretty well in his previous four starts, albeit not going deep into games. There was the grand slam early in the game, and that pretty much was all she wrote for the Phillies, but kind of speaks to the larger issue of the back of the rotation being so shaky.
Yeah, they've had a number of blemishes all season long that have conspired against them, and they're the big reason that they are, basically a 500 team. Back end of the rotation has not done a good job. Defense has been poor, the worst. I think we've established they're the worst national defensive team in the National League, the worst defensive team I've ever covered. It just seems like 2, 3, 4 times a week, defensive miscue comes in and really bites them hard and helps cost them a game or almost cost them a game. They made, one on Wednesday night in New York against the Yankees, glaring defensive miscue, and Miller missed that ball in right field. They ended up kind of pitching over it and getting out of that inning, but ultimately they lost the game. So defense, starting pitching at the back end, they've been big issues. And just the inconsistent nature of the offense has been an issue. So inconsistent with runners in scoring position, and they started off July pretty good in that area, but last 3 nights have been really poor. They've had some poor at bats, so they've lost 3 in a row. You mentioned Matt Moore. They had a defensive miscue in that first inning, cost them a run, and you use the term tone sets the tone, and I believe in that stuff, especially when you get in at 3 in the morning, and Joe Girardi kind of said they get in late, and I just thought they kind of looked sluggish all night. In all phases of the game. And geez, that's a bad time to look sluggish when you're opening an 8-game homestand. That's crucial because you're playing the team that's right on your heels, and you got management sitting up there saying, okay, we're going to make a trade, or we're going to sit still, or what? But that third inning was a tough one because, it all happened with 2 outs, and who was it? Albies got that thing going with a 2-out base hit. He kind of dunked it into left field, didn't hit it hard. It looked like it may have been jammed. Definitely didn't hit it hard, but it all starts with a 2-out hit that's really not barreled up very well. And then you get Freddie Freeman, who's just ridiculously hot. He gets a base hit. Not really crushed, couple, but contact's important. So they get 2 men on, and then boy, the 2 killer plate appearances there with a walk to Austin Riley, and then was it a 1-0 fastball right down the middle to Danby Swanson with the bases loaded grand slam. Game over. I mean, as we writers say up in the press box, write it from the top. Write it from the top, because you just know they're not coming back in that game. Not with the way they've been swinging the bats, and it was just the air went out of the balloon there, and tough way to start a 4-game series, like I said. So now they're tied with the Braves. They've lost 3 in a row. They're back under 500. I do agree with what Joe Girardi said after the game. They need a big one from Zach Wheeler on Friday night. They really need a big one from Zach.
Well, Jim, we've talked a lot here lately about the trade deadline, and particularly this week, the conversation's been mostly about buying, because the Phillies won those 4 straight series and began the month of July 10-4. but they've lost 3 in a row now. They're 4 games back of the Mets. They're now in third place in a tie with the Braves. Well, in a tie with the Braves for second place, but both teams are 47 and 48. You just wonder, like, if the Phils lose 3 or 4 in this series, if they don't pick this up quickly, like, does that affect again, that the path that Dave Dombrowski is going to take over this next week? Because the trade deadline, as we sit here on Friday morning, it's a week from today.
I think it definitely affects the approach they're going to take because, I don't know that he has, plotted a specific course. I think he is, right now looking to add. People use the word buy. I don't know that they're shaping up for a big buy. I guess if the right opportunity came along, they would. But, right now they're looking for pitching and they need back end of the rotation and they need really back of the bullpen. And they are looking in those areas. But I don't know that they're at the trigger pull stage here a week before the deadline. And, if they don't turn it around here really quickly because they're on such a tightrope, if they fall off the tightrope the wrong way, I think, Dave Dombrowski could be more definitive in making the call not to buy. So right now, I think he's angling that way. And I think he has to angle that way because they're in it. They're in it because it's a bad division. And, we're pushing April, May, June, July. We're pushing 4 months here of a mediocre, bad division. And, it might not change. So you have a chance to stay in it. So I think you have to have your eyes open to making acquisitions. But, as the clock winds down here with a week to go before the deadline, you lose the series here against Atlanta. Then you got, Washington coming in and they're going to the Orioles this weekend. They could beat up on the Orioles and all of a sudden, be right there. If you don't turn it around quickly, that could lead to management not buying, to maybe standing still, to maybe in the last 48 hours moving a piece. I look at Andrew McCutchen and the way he has swung the bat the last couple months, and I look at his just the overall way he plays. Really good guy in the clubhouse, character guy. He's been on some winning teams. I think he would be attractive to a pennant contender. He is owed a lot of money, so you're going to maybe have to eat that to get something back. But this tightrope they are between buying and selling. Like I said, I still think it leads to buying, but it could change in a hurry if they have a poor weekend here, and then Washington comes in with some confidence after Baltimore and takes it to you. So fascinating week here. Again, the Phillies control their own destiny. You want management to go out and buy a pitcher or add a pitcher? I think they want to. I think management wants to, but Phillies need to win games to give the front office reason to do that. So tonight, man, it's a big game.
Well, you mentioned Andrew McCutchen there. There were a lot of people who were confused in the series opener against the Braves why JT Realmuto and Andrew McCutchen were out of the lineup for the first game of such an important series. And some of that had to do with the fact that the Phillies got in really late back to Philadelphia on Thursday morning. What did you think of that move to have Andrew Knapp behind the plate, to have Odubel Herrera in left field against Charlie Morton in that game?
Well, there's always a lot of reasons managers make moves. They're facing some left-handed pitching coming up here, so both those guys are going to be in there for those games. And I think Realmuto was going to get one of these games off because he's a catcher, and Joe was just budgeting to use him against the left-handed pitchers coming up here, starting with Fried on Friday night. Realmuto's at bats weren't real good in the Bronx, and I think that factored into Joe's decision to rest him on Thursday night. He also wanted to stack that lineup with left-handed bats against Charlie Morton. Just the fact that they got in late. I think all of those reasons, the left-handed bats getting in late. You got a catcher who is, it's a demanding position. He's not going to catch the whole week and he's going to get a day off. You got a guy who's had 2 ACLs out in left field. So Joe was looking to rest those guys. He had Odubel. He wanted to get back in there. So a lot of reasons. It did jump out at me a little bit, especially with Realmuto, because actually I know he didn't have good at bats in New York, but he's got good numbers against Wheeler. So, you can argue it both ways forever. fact of the matter is they've lost 3 in a row, and they've done a horrible job with runners in scoring position. So, maybe resting, McCutchen has been a hot bat, and Realmuto was, who knows if it was the right or wrong thing. If they can come back and those guys can really swing it well over these next 3 nights, and they can end up winning the series, then maybe you could say it was a sound move. But it's certainly one I think you can question. But you can question every move when you don't win a ball game, when you don't play well. You can question everything.
Well, Zach Wheeler goes in game 2. He has a 2.44 ERA. His last 2 starts, though, have been kind of shaky. It's actually his worst two-start stretch in his brief time as a Philly. He's allowed 11 runs in his last 11 2/3 innings on 15 hits. So, Joe Girardi talked about how momentum is, he always talks about how momentum is your next day starting pitcher, and the Phillies have to feel good with Wheeler on the mound, but they're also going up against Max Fried, who's pretty good himself. I saw that PointsBet has his over-under total for strikeouts for Max Fried at 5.5 against the Phillies. Could go both ways. He's a lefty who's pretty tough on opposing lefties, but he's also not having quite the season Atlanta expected. And Zach Wheeler, this is a night where he needs to really earn his money, get the Phils back to even in this series.
No question. You're right. He hasn't been sharp the last couple. He usually pitches pretty well against Atlanta. He grew up outside of Atlanta, Braves fan. All his family's at home watching. I gotta believe that he can do it because he's got such a good track record here as a Philly. So, but they got to get him some early runs. That changes everything. It really helps the team play more relaxed and more confidently. Like the Braves last night, those early runs really helped them. So, this is you got Wheeler and you got Nola pitching in this series. I think Vinny goes on Saturday. Nola's start Sunday is fascinating because you mentioned Wheeler hasn't been sharp his last couple. Nola hasn't been sharp his last, most of the season with a couple exceptions. We've talked about the best acquisition they could make in July is Aaron Nola pitching to his track record. And if it's going to happen, it needs to happen Sunday. It needs to start this season needs to start turning around for him on Sunday.
Yeah, at this point, you wonder if Aaron Nola is going to be able to turn it around this season. I mean, this is reminiscent of the one bad full year that he had with the Phillies. Also kind of harkens back to I think back to this year anytime you see a good pitcher go through it. But Cole Hamels in 2009, where just all of a sudden he wasn't the same guy that he was, in previous seasons. And with Nola, I think the surprising thing is that he just hasn't been reliable to give the Phillies length in games. He's had a lot of starts end during the 6th inning. Like he comes out to pitch the 6th and he might get that first out, but the pitch count is high. He just hasn't looked like the same guy. I know that, you've mentioned that the fastball command has not been there, but I also kind of wonder if right now Nola kind of senses all this swirling negativity around him, because it's not just his performance. It's also how most of the city is reacting to the Phillies' current vaccine situation.
I don't know. I don't know if he senses all that negativity. I've always looked at him as a guy that kind of can put the blinders on and gets in his little cocoon and really just kind of focuses at on his craft, pitching and task at hand. But I do wonder if something intangibly might be going on. And to me, he just looks dejected. And to me, he looks like his confidence is down. And confidence is, so important for any athlete. Those look like the confidence thing looks like it's weighing on him a little bit, because I think he's a really responsible guy. And this opens up a whole can of worms, I know, with the vaccine thing. But I'm talking about when he gets on the mound. I think he feels a responsibility as a starting pitcher to, put a team on his back, to, follow the old pitching commandment, thou shalt keep your team in the game. Thou shalt give your team a chance to win for the starting pitcher. So I think he knows that he hasn't done that. And I think that weighs on him. So I see, like I said, I see just looks a little dejected in some post-game comments and post-game Zooms after he doesn't pitch well. And I wonder where his confidence is. I think he's going to have like 12 or 13 starts left. You start to wonder if this is trending toward a lost season or it's going to be a lost season. It's starting to feel that way, but I also think the guy is good enough that he can turn it around and have some consistency over his last 12 starts. But it just seems like he's battled mechanical issues all year. I go back to, I listen to Larry Anderson a lot. Larry and Nola has lacked his fastball command, and that's his bread and butter. And Larry sees mechanical issues, and Larry's got great eyes for pitching. He sees him getting under his fastball instead of staying on top of his fastball. He doesn't throw the sinker as nearly as much anymore. I don't want to say he's eliminated it, but that used to be a real bread and butter pitch for him. We don't see it that much anymore. He's been, the fastball location, he's been up, and he's not 97, 90. He's not going to blow it by guys. When he's up, he's going to get hurt with it. So it's been a real head scratcher of a year. You hope he can start turning it around Sunday, because if he doesn't, even in a terrible division, they're not going to get there.
Well, yeah, Nola is one of their most important players. A couple of their other most important players, JT Realmuto, as you said, hasn't been, setting the world on fire offensively coming out of the All-Star break. Bryce Harper hasn't homered in 11 games. And, if you look at his batting average, on base percentage, slugging percentage, they're right in line with his career norms, almost exactly what his career averages are. But he hasn't carried the Phillies on his back for a couple of weeks or helped them win a bunch of games in a row with his talent. And, he fouled 3 balls off of his ankle the other night in New York, just one of many injuries that he's dealt with this season. You wonder, does this guy – nobody's 100% at this time of year, but you wonder, if all that Harper's dealt with this year between shoulder and back, the pitch he fouled off – the pitch that hit his face, that deflected off his wrist, and the lower body injuries, does Harper have that in him in this second half?
I don't know. I don't know. He's had a good year. When you look at the numbers, you look at the stat sheet, you say that's a good year. I mean, the RBIs haven't been where you'd hoped, but there are reasons for that. There are things called RBI opportunities, and he has not performed as well with runners on base. But I mean, he can go off. We've seen it before. He can go off for 3 weeks and really carry a team. What a difference that would make! But yeah, you have to wonder about the cumulative effect of all these nagging injuries, because when you slip even a little bit, you become ordinary. You become very vulnerable. And there's been times he's looked that way. If the cumulative effect of these injuries is knocking him down now and preventing him from doing the things you expected when you signed him to be a guy that can carry a team, that's scary, because he's only 28 and he has a decade remaining on this contract, a decade. So it's just to me, it's a cause for concern.
Well, Didi Gregorius' contract is not nearly the same length, but his defense is another concern. He has 9 errors in 46 games, and they've been all different sorts of errors. Some because his range is limited and he's slow to get to balls. Someplace he just hasn't made, he's kicked. Didi's also under contract for next season. This is a pretty big deal for the Phillies. The fact that the defense has been so porous at shortstop for the most part, when Didi's been starting those games. And you just wonder, what pathway is to correct this or to get out of this? They signed Didi to a 2-year, $28 million contract. They're beholden to him for that time. But, man, that defense is just so shaky right now at such an important spot.
Oh, hugely important spot. I mean, traditionally, really at every level of the game, shortstop is usually where you put your most talented defensive player. And he has not looked like that, even close. I mean, made a big error in New York the other night that really hurt them. The range is concerned, the throwing arms are concerned. To me, he throws a lot of balls flat-footed. And when you do that, it has a tendency to sail a little bit. But it's a concern over here, coming up over here, the final 6 or 7 weeks of the season. No, what do we got more than that? Final 2 months of the season, 2+ months. So it's more like 10 weeks, 9 or 10 weeks of the season. Concern in that time frame, but also concern down the road next year, because though everything's focused on now and getting to the playoffs, and I believe getting to the playoffs will be so important because you haven't been there it'll be a decade, and you need to turn that around. You need to get there. You need to give people some reason for excitement. You need to get there and take your chance and see if you can win a series with your starting pitching if they're going good. But down the road, they need to address a lot of things with this team. Continue to address the bullpen because it's not good. Continue to address the back end of the rotation, develop a more complete rotation. But defense this winter, it has to be something they need to dig into and fix. And I don't know how they're going to do that. I mean, their left side of the infield defense is very suspect. It's flat out poor. Maybe Bohm ends up at first base where we all think he will. Maybe Hoskins becomes a DH if the DH comes to the National League, as we all think it will. Maybe DD ends up at third base. Will he be better over there? Range is still important over there, but not as important as shortstop. So maybe he becomes your third baseman with Bohm going over to first and Hoskins as a DH, or maybe there's a trade in there. I don't know. His left-handed bat is important to the club. As we saw last night, he had a couple extra base hits late in that game. You get those a little earlier in the game, and you never know. It might be a different situation. But defense at any level of the game will just kill you. And it's a big reason why the Phillies are just treading water and treading water and treading water. They're not a good defensive team. We started last night in the first inning. A play. To me, there was a lazy play by Odubel Herrera. He's got to be better than that. And there's a lot of different ways to look at that play. Girardi, I'm not sure if Joe was defending him after the game because that's the way Joe operates. He has his players' backs. He said he should have thrown it right into third base to stop the runner. Well, the runner had already stopped at third base. He wasn't going anywhere. Albies did a great job reading a lazy throw into second base and bolted. And then if they make a good throw to the plate, he's out. So they don't execute on a couple of fronts there. But I didn't once Albies had stopped at third base, and like I said, he did stop. I didn't have a problem with Odubel trying to go to second to keep the double play in order. But man, firm it in there, fire it. So hats off to Ozzie Albies. I know he would have been out by 10 feet, but he saw an opportunity and he went for it early in the game. It could have blown up in his face, but you know what? It ended up working because the Phillies didn't execute. And that, like you said earlier, it was a tone setter.
Well, thinking about this defensively, what you just talked about with the idea of potentially moving Bohm to first and Hoskins to DH if the National League gets the DH in the next collective bargaining agreement this offseason, the Phillies are also probably going to have two new outfielders next year in left field and center field. Andrew McCutchen's contract expiring. So those are areas they could upgrade defensively. The problem is none of that really helps things the second half of this season. And, as you said, this is one of the major reasons why the Phillies have been treading water, why they haven't been able to go on a sustained winning streak, is these just defensive lapses that occur. As they go into this final week before the trade deadline, I know we've talked a lot about pitching. There are also some really attractive center fielders. I mean, do you think that there's an outside shot that we see the Phillies make a play for a Starling Marte or a Byron Buxton or a player like that? Or do you think that this is just fully pitching and that's the route that Dave Dombrowski is going to go? If the Phillies
I don't know if they have the minor league pieces to get Buxton, who would be probably, to me, the most attractive guy because he's under control, right? For how many years is he under control for?
Well, it's a little bit of a delicate issue because the reason the Twins would end up trading him if they do is because he wouldn't be signing with them long term. So even if you get him under control, if you make a play for Byron Buxton, you're pretty much committing yourself to signing him for a huge contract. I would think similarly with maybe not as much with Starling Marte because he's purely a rental, but that would be the issue is, do you want to commit that many years and dollars to a player who's perpetually injured?
So Buxton is under control next year. He'll be a free agent after 2022. So that control is attractive, but he has been injured. He's currently injured. And I don't know that, for a guy with that health history, you want to give up pieces of your future And I don't even know that the Phillies have enough to get him. The other two guys that we hear a lot about, Chris Bryant and Starling Marte, are both going to be free agents this winter, both going to be looking for big scores financially. And I don't know that the Phillies payroll structure, with already having big tickets in Wheeler, Realmuto, and Harper, I don't know that they are going to have an appetite for another one, especially with a Chris Bryant, who's going to be looking for a huge payday, Scott Boras guy, to give up the pieces that would require to get those two guys for, just basically renting them for 2 months when I'm not even sure they can get you where you need to go, because I think this team needs pitching a lot more than it needs anything else. I don't know that that's where their focus is, and I don't know that's where their focus should be.
All right, well, it's a huge weekend for the Phillies against a Braves team that is tied with them as we enter Friday. Both teams 47 and 48. The Phils have Zach Wheeler, Vince Velasquez, and Aaron Nola going in these final 3 games. So they got to feel like they got to pick up 2 out of 3 to end the series, at least.
Yeah. Phillies, they could be alone in second place tonight, or they could drop to being all alone in third place, and then Washington coming in right on your tails on Monday. So a huge little stretch here. Obviously, we got the trade deadline, but the Braves have a real chance to impact this race a lot, like they did Thursday night, because they got 3 more in Philadelphia, then they go to New York and play the Mets. They could really stake their claim and do some damage in these next few days. I know they've been hurt. I know they don't have Acuna. I know their bullpen's giving them a lot of trouble, but if they're going to get hot for a week, they have a chance to really impact this race. So it's up to the Phillies to kind of stop it. Zach Wheeler has to be the definition of a stopper Friday night, but then it can't stop there. You need Vinny Velasquez to somehow dial up a good one on Saturday, and you need Aaron Nola to be the Aaron Nola of old on Sunday. If he's going to turn the corner, and he has to turn the corner, if this team's going to get where it needs to be, it has to start Sunday. So we'll see.
Yeah, for all the injuries the Phillies have dealt with this year, they're the healthiest of these 4 teams in the NL East that are competing for the division. So now's the time, if ever, to make a push. Thanks for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast. He's Jim Salisbury. I'm Corey Seidman. Talk to you next week.